Imagine walking through a busy Brooklyn neighborhood where the streets are full of life. Caribbean restaurants, music from passing cars, people rushing to the subway. It feels modern, vibrant, and alive. But beneath these everyday streets lies a story that most people walking here have no idea about. A story that goes back more than 350 years. A story of hidden villages, forgotten battles, powerful families, and a community that survived wave after wave of change. This is the untold history of Flatbush. Long before skyscrapers and subway lines existed, the land we now call Flatbush was home to the Lenape people. They lived here peacefully for generations, hunting, fishing, and farming the fertile land. The area was filled with forests, streams, and open fields. To them, this place wasn't called Flatbush at all. They had their own names for the land, their own traditions, and their own deep connection to the environment. Then, in the mid-1600s, something happened that would completely change the future of this place. Dutch settlers arrived and founded a small village called Midwout, which means Middle Woods. This tiny settlement sat right between other Dutch towns like Brooklyn and Amersfoort. Over time, Midwout would slowly evolve into what we now know as Flatbush. Life in that early village was simple but strict. The Dutch settlers built wooden homes, farms, and churches. They planted crops and raised animals. But the village was tightly controlled by colonial leaders. In fact, one of the most fascinating moments in Flatbush history happened in 1656. At that time, the governor of the Dutch colony, Peter Stuyvesant, tried to force religious rules on the people living here. Some residents believed everyone should be allowed to worship freely, even if their beliefs were different. So they wrote a protest letter defending religious freedom. This letter became known as the famous Flushing Remonstrance, even though the letter came from another nearby town. The debate about religious freedom spread across Dutch villages like Flatbush. Many historians believe these early arguments helped plant the seeds for what would later become the idea of religious freedom in America. As the years passed, the small farming village slowly grew. But one thing about Flatbush remained unique. For nearly 2 centuries, it stayed mostly rural. While Manhattan became crowded and commercial, Flatbush was filled with farms, open land, and quiet dirt roads. Imagine standing in Flatbush in the early 1800s. Instead of apartment buildings and busy traffic, you would see orchards, cows grazing in fields, and farmers working the land. It looked more like a countryside village than part of one of the biggest cities in the world. One of the most powerful families in the area during this time was the Lefferts family. Their farmhouse, built in the late 1700s, still exists today inside Prospect Park. The Lefferts family owned large amounts of land and were deeply involved in the community for generations. But their story also reveals a difficult and often hidden part of Flatbush history. Like many wealthy families of that era, the Lefferts family owned enslaved people. Slavery existed in Brooklyn much longer than most people realize. In fact, enslaved Africans worked on farms throughout Flatbush during the 1700s. One true story tells of an enslaved man who attempted to escape from a farm in the Flatbush area in the late 1700s. Historical records show that local newspapers published ads offering rewards for the capture of escaped slaves. These small details reveal how deeply slavery was connected to daily life here, even in places people now think of as far from the American South. As the 1800s moved forward, Flatbush began to transform again. New roads were built, connecting Brooklyn more closely to Manhattan. Wealthy families started building large Victorian homes in the area, turning parts of Flatbush into beautiful suburban neighborhoods. Then something happened that would change everything forever. In 1898, Brooklyn officially became part of New York City. Suddenly, Flatbush was no longer a quiet rural town. It was now part of one of the largest cities on Earth. The early 1900s brought enormous growth. Subway lines extended deeper into Brooklyn, bringing thousands of new residents. Apartment buildings replaced farmland, streets filled with shops, schools, and businesses. But perhaps the most powerful transformation happened in the second half of the 20th century. People from all over the world began making Flatbush their home. Immigrants from the Caribbean, especially Jamaica, Haiti, Trinidad, and Barbados, moved into the neighborhood and built strong communities. Today, Flatbush is often called the heart of Caribbean Brooklyn. Walk along Church Avenue or Nostrand Avenue and you'll hear reggae music, smell jerk chicken cooking, and see shops filled with Caribbean culture. The neighborhood became one of the most vibrant cultural centers in New York City. But even in modern times, pieces of the past still remain hidden in plain sight. Some of the oldest streets still follow the same paths laid out by Dutch farmers hundreds of years ago. Historic homes quietly stand between modern buildings. And if you visit the old Dutch Reformed Church in Flatbush, You'll be standing on ground where villagers gathered more than 300 years ago. There are even rumors among local historians that parts of the original Dutch village still lie buried underground beneath modern streets. Old foundations, forgotten wells, and lost artifacts may still exist beneath the busy sidewalks people walk every day. One of the most fascinating things about Flatbush is how many different layers of history exist in the same place. Indigenous land, Dutch farming village, colonial settlement, rural countryside, growing suburb, immigrant community, global neighborhood. Each generation reshaped the area. But none of the earlier stories truly disappeared. They simply became hidden beneath the surface. So the next time someone walks through Flatbush, passing subway stations, restaurants, and busy streets, it might seem like just another New York neighborhood, but the truth is, every corner has a story. A story of the Lenape people who lived here first. A story of Dutch settlers building a tiny village in the middle of the woods. A story of families who farmed this land for centuries. A story of freedom, struggle, migration, and cultural transformation. Flatbush isn't just a neighborhood in Brooklyn. It's a living timeline of New York City itself.